Hello and welcome to A-Team Group's webinar on modernising legacy data infrastructure to create agile and accessible digital platforms. My name's Sarah Underwood. I'm an editor here at A-Team Group, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Our expert speakers today are Gary Collier, Chief Technology Officer at Man Group, Matt Barrett, CEO and co-founder at Adaptive, Anvar Karimson, Chief Technology Officer at Kepler Chevrolet, apologies, Anvar, and James Worcester, COO at Glue42. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a moment, but first a few things to help you make the most of the webinar. To the right of the video screen, you'll see a Slido section. We'll be running 3 polls today, so do please vote in those, and we can gauge industry interest and opinion in the areas we're talking about. And also you'll see a panel for questions. Please put your questions in that panel whenever you want to, and we'll try and answer as many as we can as we go along, or at least towards the end of the webinar. So all questions there, and do take part in the Slido polls. So that's it for me for now, and let me ask our speakers to introduce themselves. Gary, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interest here.
Hi, I'm very happy to. So I run a department at Man Group called Alpha Technology, which is a front office technology group, around 230 engineers and data scientists, and we support all of the quant, systematic and discretionary front office trading within Man. And Man's a very large asset manager, around $140 billion under management, and roughly half of my team building out platform technology, data systems, execution systems, research, quant systems. Around half are working in an embedded fashion, helping front office investment professionals build models, build portfolio tools, that thing. So everything in the talk today is deeply connected to my day job.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Barrett. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Adaptive. My interest in data infrastructure, it really comes from the fact that our focus as a business is on building front office trading platforms. Liquidity discovery, liquidity distribution, and trade execution is what we focus on, and the lifeblood of those systems is data. Data that flows into them, and the data that they generate that flows out and goes elsewhere into trading enterprises. We think long and hard about how to build modern trading systems. We don't want to be building tomorrow's legacy today, and so we're always thinking about what the future of trading technology looks like and trying to build systems today that will remain flexible, performant, open, and easy to integrate with in the coming years. And so all the topics that we're gonna touch on today are things that myself and our teams think about when building systems for our clients.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Anwar.
Great. Yes, I'm the CTO at Kepler Chevreau and KCX. We are a leading independent agency broker, and as you can imagine, data analytics and trading systems is at the heart of everything we do. We use that together with our agility and client-centric approach to build solutions that hopefully our clients love. Okay,
that's great. And James.
Hi there, I'm James Worcester. I'm COO of Glue42. We're a provider of desktop integration platforms, and so the subject of this webinar is key to what we do. We focus on improving user experience through the integration of both data and user interface. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Great, thank you all. A lot of expertise in the room for this one. So let's start with a poll question. It is, what are the challenges of legacy data infrastructure at your organization? And you can tick as many of the boxes as you feel are appropriate to your organization. And while you answer the question, and you can, as I said, select as many options as you like, let me come to Anwar to set the scene and answer a similar question. So Anwar, how do you see the challenges that legacy data infrastructure presents for trading teams?
Great question, Sarah. I think for us, the main pain point is definitely around the agility, because ultimately for us, what is important is a quick turnaround. It's being able to have a lot of flexibility in how we choose things. I think it's safe to say that the world is moving faster than ever, and in the world of technology and data, it's probably exponential at this rate. That means that for someone in my position, for instance, we have to take a lot of decisions on a daily basis around which direction to go to. And it's that agility that will allow us to, I guess, make mistakes while being able to recover very quickly from them. And if we don't have that, then all of a sudden, the processes get heavier. You have to, you have the risk element. There's a morale implication on the teams. So I would have to say that the primary pain point is definitely around the agility part.
Okay, James, what would you say there?
Well, I guess I'm interpreting your question as one of the challenges with legacy data, but also the challenges with legacy applications, because I guess the two go hand in hand in many situations. So the challenge, I think, depends on who you are. We look at this through the prism of either a user's perspective or operational perspective or IT. From a user's standpoint, legacy systems are legacy only because sat next to them is something modern, and therefore you need to be able to navigate within and between those systems very quickly, and that presents a problem with older technologies. From an operations perspective, swivel sharing between applications is not efficient. Worse still, on a busy trading day, it can be downright dangerous, as you're not able to do the things that you should be doing in the time that you have available. And then finally, from an IT perspective, as we all know, integrating different technologies is non-trivial. Finding resources available to do that is also a real challenge in the market. Trying to find a .NET developer, good luck.
Yeah, thank you. So agility, just having everything you need there, getting modernizing, all a challenge all around. Let's see what our audience said. Could we see those poll results, please? Okay, that's something that you mentioned, James. Anwar, would you like to comment on those results?
Yeah. No, I think they're really interesting. I think that I obviously agree with James. Integration and interoperability between systems and applications are hugely important. And I think I'm not surprised by the poll results.
Okay, that's great. Something that you mentioned there, James, as well, at the top of the list. Does that come as a surprise to you? Or
no, we had a record year last year, and this sort of underlines what we're seeing. I think the desktop integration market has turned a corner in the last 18 months. it's now pretty much on the top of everyone's agenda. So that does not surprise me.
Okay, that's great. Thank you both very much indeed. And let's run another poll question. This time the question is your organization actively looking to modernize legacy data infrastructure? And I expect the answer is somewhere yes and some no. Let's find out. And while you place your votes, let me bring in Gary to talk about why now is the time to invest in modernizing and creating agile and accessible digital platforms. And will this be a third party or an internal build?
Sure. A couple of thoughts there. Rather than now being the time, I mean, I'd argue that now is always the time, and a couple of reasons for that. One, I think the distinction, when we talk about a distinction between legacy and modern, it's presenting something as being a kind of binary choice, when the world is much more nuanced. It's much more like shades of grey. Things don't just suddenly flip from being like modern to legacy overnight. And I think the other facet here is the world of complexity. The world of tech and data is massively more complex than it was 1 decade ago, certainly 2 decades ago. Lots of different parts. So I think that the way to view things, rather than right now being a particular point in time where we suddenly stop doing things in a legacy way and build some like new modern stuff, is to view the world slightly differently, to view that as like multiple like wavefronts of change. I quite like that term. Well, wavefronts of change in terms of underlying infrastructure, waypoints of change in terms of like programming languages, versions of them, lots of software packages, like third-party pieces of open source. Now, all of this stuff is like racing forward. So I'd argue now is the time, and now is always the time to be looking at what we have, thinking about how we might like reinvent it for the future. Because if we consider in a very abstract fashion how tech can help us and how tech can help our businesses, it can help us do 2 things. It can help us to do things efficiently. It can automate tasks and take away toil, and it can help us to do things that we could not otherwise do. It can help us to innovate. And if we're operating in businesses that are forward-looking, then we should always be thinking about how we can do things more efficiently, and we should always be thinking about how we can innovate more. So tech is the natural partner for this, and hence we should always be looking for this constant evolution of older ways of doing things into newer ways of doing things, without necessarily characterizing them simplistically as legacy and modern.
Okay, thank you, Matt. What do you see out there in the industry and in your company in terms of the investment? Is it now? Has it been made? Is it, as Gary said, to being made all along the way?
Yeah, as Gary said, perhaps unsurprisingly, being a technologist like Gary, I'm also of the view that the best time to invest in modernizing your technology was yesterday, and the next best time is today, because this stuff is always absolutely moving forward. I think the next wave of disruption, technology disruption, if we can characterize one outside of the general constant change across the front office, is cloud. We've seen it change the world outside of capital markets over the last 15 years. We've seen it change the back office and middle office worlds within capital markets in the last 4 to 5 years. And I think we're starting to see it change the front office of capital markets now and into the next 3 or 4 years. The vendors of risk analytics, market surveillance are already on the cloud, and I think users and clients' lives will be a lot easier if the market participants, so the firms like Anvar's and Gary's, join them in the cloud for their day-to-day business operations. The use of open APIs and cloud provision services and UI tooling deployed within an organization to stitch everything together represents a sort of golden opportunity at the moment to accelerate delivery and generate revenues derived from data platforms. To the question of whether it's going to be third party or internal investment, I think it's going to be both. There are some big investment waves happening at the moment. Obviously, internal investment for where firms really want to differentiate is never going to go away. But the cloud providers are spending well, more than billions on modernizing their technology platforms, their physical infrastructure and their software substrate to support front office capital markets workloads. And the vendors backed by the VC industry, the private equity industry, are getting in on the picture very, very, very heavily as well. And there's a lot of capital markets VC investment coming into smaller firms trying to build point solutions on top of platforms provided by the cloud providers, and that will need to be connected internally to generate real value for businesses.
Right, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Let's see what our audience's plans are in terms of investment. And Matt, would you like to comment on that?
That's reassuring from the perspective of all of us here today that half the people on the call are view infrastructure as requiring continuous updating. One of the things I think it's worth pointing out is that technology really has changed in the last 10 to 15 years from a OpEx CapEx perspective. It used to be the case that you could write a Java program, deploy a jar, put it on a server in your basement, and reboot it every couple of months to keep it stable. Now you're deploying containerized code into a API-driven environment, with those APIs changing on a monthly, weekly, or even daily basis. And you need to keep the investment up to even stay in the same place. Yes, you can go quicker, but there is a cost to that.
Okay, thank you all on that one. And Matt, staying with you, we've touched on these things a little bit, but in a world with no constraints, what would the ideal trading platform and its technology look like?
I think it would look like, honestly, I think it would look like zero marginal cost venue connectivity and zero marginal cost market data. That is the feedback we get from clients, is that venue connectivity is still a cottage industry, expensive, tiresome, and not adding real market value, not adding real enterprise value to the firms that are involved in it, and that market data is hugely expensive and needs to be purchased in very large chunks to achieve incremental value, and that both of those pricing models would do well to change. Alongside that, you'd have best of breed point solutions integrated through open APIs, where you're not beholden to another firm's vendor's data model that limits your ability to operate. And you wouldn't be using vendor software because of how do I put this? You wouldn't be forced to use vendor software because of non-functional capabilities, e.g. venue connectivity, venue normalization, or some sort of market data aggregation, historical features. We hear from firms very regularly that they're dissatisfied with the large vendor solutions, but have to use the software because of what sits behind the software in terms of order flow, market data, and those other necessary but not sufficient parts of the capital markets data landscape.
Okay, Anwar, what would your dream solution look like?
Well, I had a clear view, but I'm a little bit thrown now after Matt's answer. I would agree that if I had free, easy to use, and flexible market connectivity and market data, that'd be phenomenal. But until then, I think the main thing for someone like us is a platform that has batteries included, but with batteries that are removable, really, because at the end of the day, there's always that decision, do you build or do you buy? And there's various trade-offs there. But I think in today's sort of modern time, there's a continuum there, because what we'd like to do is to buy the things that we might not want to differentiate on. We'll buy the OMS, but it's very important for us that we can iterate and change and remove bits from that OMS as we grow. And I think that's really how the dream platform will look for me. It's something that you can partner up with someone, you can build and grow it organically, and then as you get the need for that agility, you can swap and replace things, going back to a little bit what Gary was saying, in that there's not one wave of change. It's a constant number of streams of change, and you want to be able to keep that up indefinitely, really, which will allow you to tackle things like the cloud, various machine learning changes, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thank you both very much indeed. And let's run a final audience poll question here. It is, what are the key requirements of modern trading infrastructure at your organization? And once more, you can tick as many of the boxes as you feel appropriate. And while you do that, let me bring James in again, and let's get back to reality, unfortunately, and talk about the key requirements as firms move from legacy to a more modern trading infrastructure. And as everybody's pointed out, this is not an overnight job.
No, indeed. Sort of the days of big bang, sort of switch the lights off, turn them on again, following morning have long since gone. So that leads to the first key requirement, which is an incremental approach. Now, one technique that we use in the integration space is this idea of componentizing the existing applications, legacy or otherwise. And then orchestrating those components together to meet new and changing business requirements. The overall subject of this webinar is about data, but let's not forget the user interface as well. Just integrating data is a really great start, don't get me wrong, but leaving behind in its wake a trail of disjointed and random UIs is still going to create problems. I want to agree with Matt in terms of open systems and open standards. I want to give a shout out for Finos and one of their standards, which is FDC3, which defines how applications can talk to each other without any prior contracts. That's really important. And I think, web-based technologies is clearly where the desktop environment for trading is going. But that means two things. It means that the applications themselves should be surfaced through a web browser, but the integration platform should also be surfaced through a web browser. The days of deploying containers, no, long since gone. And then finally, like all good IT programs, you should monitor what you do in order to check that you've done the right thing. So look for integration platforms that can help you measure the success that you've created, because it will help build the business case for future change.
Thank you, James. And Gary, what would you identify as the key requirements?
So if we accept the lots of wavefronts of change argument, and if we accept that technology can help by allowing us to do things more efficiently and allow us to innovate more and give us a competitive edge, and we want to be agile as well and very responsive to business change, I think that points to a model that is well, at least not wholly vendor software, and to sort of nail my colours to Matt, I have a very small amount of vendor software in my estate. Most of it is open source, and I think the combination of open source, having components that can do things well, and of course they're embracing the constant evolution given the number of people who are using and leveraging the popular open source packages. So by using those units and bringing a whole bunch of clever engineers and data scientists to bear to weave in the firm's IP and join things together in the right way and add our own secret sauce, I think that's a pretty heady combination for keeping on top of change and actually allowing tech to do what we want it to do, which is drive the business forward and act as a point of differentiation.
Okay, thank you both, and may we see the poll results, please? And James, I hand this one over to you to comment on. Oh, there's a lot to read there. A high performance tech stack comes up very at the top, ultra low latency, desktop interoperability. We've got something missing at the top there. Jerry-Ann, can you tell us what that one at the top is?
Yeah, what's the top
There
one?
you go, high speed connectivity. Okay, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I guess the top one goes without saying. There's no point running your trading desk on a dial-up line. So yeah, I totally agree with those. It's interesting that desktop interoperability is 50%. I remember doing these webinars a few years ago, and most people didn't know what it was. So that's really important. And going back to Matt's comment about cloud, I'm glad to see that's reasonably high up in the list.
Okay, and of course, Anwar's point on flexibility, and agility. Excellent. Thank you all for voting. Thank you for that, James. And staying with you, James, no, I'm going to come back to Gary first. Gary, what practical steps can firms take to achieve the requirements we've noted above and deliver these high-performance technology stacks with all those things people want?
I think there are a few things to note there. I mean, platform is an oft-used word, and people like to talk about platforms. But if we look at firms that are truly successful in using tech to power them up, then at the heart of those firms is a high quality technical platform, something that does a lot of heavy lifting, but democratizes, makes the ability to innovate and use tech as a driver of business change. It democratizes that. So I think as part of technology strategy for organizations, making sure that platform is front and center. And that often means making difficult decisions. You would typically find, well, front office types, well, yes, give me the best technologists and the best engineers. But if you think about where those individuals can have maximum leverage, it's often building the platform technology that other people can benefit from.
Okay, thank you, Matt. What would you say there in terms of practical steps to getting to a very good tech stack?
I think you need to start by figuring out where you are, assessing your current state, which is something that we find a lot of firms don't really know. We spend quite a bit of time in early stage design phases with clients, figuring out their current landscape, and a lot of that work is us helping them understand something that we would have thought they would understand themselves already. I think there can be possibly a view that the general landscape is moving too quickly to really understand where it is, but before you make any plans, you really have to have a good snapshot of where you are right then and there. You also need to take a view of the future. You need to, in a sense, skate to where the puck is going to be, so to speak. And to do that, you need to have a bet on what you think the future trading technology landscape is going to look like. Our view is that the future is here, but fairly unevenly distributed. It's not my quote, it's something, but I wish I'd come up with. And that it tends to arrive slowly and then all at once for people not on the bleeding edge. There are also different advantages to being in on the cutting edge or in the first followers. For use of different technology types, for different types of businesses, and how they think they're going to go about generating alpha or generating revenue in their own business models. And then I think that the plan should really be to implement, to Anvar's point, flexibility and open connectivity as an architectural approach with a broad and agnostic, asset class agnostic platform. And move away from monolithic vendors with capabilities that will soon be disrupted. I would not recommend to people in the current climate to be onboarding themselves onto a very large scale O or EMS vendors offering, for example, because I think by the time you get through that onboarding, let's say it takes 2 to 3 years, the landscape will have been hugely disrupted, and they might have a fairly serious case of buyer's remorse.
Okay, buyer's remorse. I like that. Staying with you, Matt, then that's part of what you've got to do. How then do you deal with related data challenges, perhaps cloud-based data, low latency data, intraday data, all to be resolved as part of platform modernization?
Absolutely. As a prerequisite, you need a distribution, also known as a messaging layer that can span on cloud, on-prem, and co-located networks. You would also be well advised to look into open source for the lowest layers of infrastructure. 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was pretty standard to buy vendor solutions for this. There used to be a fairly large vendor market for web push, used to distribute prices over the web to mobile or desktop clients. Now that's a W3C standard encoded in all HTML5 browsers and web servers, goes by the name of WebSockets. So this, what was once proprietary software, becomes open source, commodified, and open very quickly. And so whenever you're looking at refreshing or modernizing your platform, it's very important to do have a good honest look at what's available in the open source landscape and move away from low-level vendor dependencies and instead take those vendor dependencies further up the stack or the abstraction layer where it makes sense to.
Okay, and Val, how do you do that with you have some of your tech now, you've got all the data coming in from all over the place. How do you bring that all together?
Yeah, to Matt's point, you need a layer that can sort of seamlessly bridge the different worlds. Open source is hugely important for us. Not having sort of vendor tie-ins, again, hugely important to us. But I think the way we approach it is to really look, we would never modernize our platform for the sake of modernizing it. It's just not what we do. So it's really about the challenge that you're trying to address. One of the big projects we embarked on was to revamp our analytics and machine learning data suite, and for that the specific challenge we were looking for was that we physically could not buy hardware fast enough to keep up with the demand from our clients, from our business users. So cloud was a natural extension point for us. Today buying a GPU is actually not that straightforward. Buying a high performance server could take months and months and months still. So we need that that stepping stone into the cloud. But of course, turning the lights off and waking up tomorrow and you're all in the cloud is not the reality, unfortunately. And again, there's connectivity issues, there's latency issues that we still unfortunately are facing. So it is that open source layer bridging the worlds is super important, I think.
Okay, great. Let's move to the desktop, if we may, and coming to you, James. What is the role of the desktop in creating agile and accessible digital platforms?
I guess it depends on the definition of agile. Picking up a point made earlier, if in the future we are going to steer clear of monolithic applications, which I also believe is a good and sensible approach, then the consequence of that, almost by definition, is that you'll end up with a larger number of smaller components. And clearly there's benefit in that approach because you can compose and recompose. You don't need to bet your entire business on one third-party vendor. The consequence of that, though, is that those individual, typically SaaS-based applications served from the cloud need to talk to each other. And so the role of desktop integration becomes even more important as you try and create this kind of agile desktop. And I think it's also worth pointing out that I've been dealing with integration technologies for all of my career now. Every major bank, every hedge fund, every investment firm has spent millions, if not billions in total, on integration software, but they've done it all on the server side and these days in the cloud. Hasn't fixed the desktop problem, it's actually made it worse. And so fixing the desktop is key, whilst you still have humans executing trades, which will be for some time to come. Okay.
Gary, what would you say there in terms of the desktop from a user perspective and getting everybody satisfied with what they can do?
A couple of thoughts there. I guess there's the age-old viewing content versus creating content, and whilst mobile devices are great for viewing things like risk reports, portfolio reports on the move, and assimilation of that information, great. In terms of creating content and having access to a much broader, richer set of visuals, then desktop is still king. Now, one particular, I think, quite novel aspect of content creation, if you were to wander around our trading desk now, you would see that desktops are being used to create code much more than they were. So one thing we've been pushing on is teaching everybody in the firm here has got access to coding courses, can learn Python. It's something that there's been a particularly strong uptake of on the trading desk. Of course, quants have been coding in Python for a decade. One interesting new facet of the desktop, and again, this is all delivered via web technology, and agree with my colleagues on the panel here. You would see notebook technology now being used to bring data, bring the tech platform to the traders to allow them to self-serve more and make themselves more efficient and satisfy curiosity, the sorts of questions that they might ask in a self-serve kind of manner. So that's another kind of new novel use of the desktop on the trading desk.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And diving into tech, Matt, what technologies and solutions and services are particularly helpful here in terms of the data stack, data management, and the desktop?
The desktop is all about user experience for me, and being able to tightly integrate the UX team's design workflows with the developer workflows gives a huge drive in delivery efficiency in bespoke UI development since the world moved to HTML5, really. We're long past the days of UX designers working in Photoshop or InDesign, mocking up fairly abstract UX and UI designs and layouts, and then developers implementing them to attempt to be pixel perfect. Now we see workflows that enable designers to sit alongside business users to implement workflows, designs, layouts, data capture, data forms in clickable prototype form that then get transmuted into the HTML5 and CSS that is built and run inside the actual web application. That's taken design cycles from months, weeks down to mornings, and it really has made a huge difference. The other thing that I think is really important is ensuring the lowest impedance mismatch between back-end data APIs and delivery to the front end. Capital markets are a stream-based, event-driven world, and technologists should, in my view, stop using HTTP request response to deliver data to your users. You need to stream it so that it's always up to date, and you need to work with abstractions that support that and let that happen very quickly and efficiently from a developer and operational support perspective. So it requires the right tooling with the right abstractions. I mean, we've invested in our own platform over the years to enable the accelerated delivery of these sorts of platforms, because we just didn't find and continue to not find the right support and tooling from open source or other vendor products to operate within a purely capital markets event-driven stream first world.
Okay, thank you. Again, over to you, Anvar, and as a user, what techs are you finding useful? You also mentioned ML a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I mean, cloud for us is a big game changer. As the trend is right now with large language models, it's something that's really interesting for us in particular. But I also sort of want to latch on to what Matt said about the event-driven sort of aspect of things, because I think that's, for us, that's part of the user experience. For us, user experience extends further than just what you can see. It's that this whole interaction end to end with us as an agency broker for our clients. And to support our front office staff, that we sort of have to go beyond the user interface and look at how can we have machines look at what's going on with the data on a per client basis and use that to augment our front office staff so that they don't have to stare at 8 screens at the same time all day, every day, and can focus on sort of doing what they do best, which is bring things together and really analyze the situation for our clients and provide that sort of client service to them. So I think event-driven technologies are hugely important, and so is cloud. Okay, James, what would you say here?
Well, I would have said what Anwar has just said. So I'm thinking on the feet now. We see a trend in the marketplace, which is towards what some of our clients call the active desktop. So don't sit there passively anymore. Human beings are too expensive to have them just wait for stuff to occur. And so an event-driven desktop, which brings important information through notifications or other similar techniques to their attention, is what we're seeing in lots of sub-markets within financial services. I'll pick up on the machine learning piece as well. Imagine if everything that your users are doing with their permission is monitored to the extent that you know what good behavior looks like, because you know that good behavior corresponds with good outcomes. Well, then you can start to coerce user behavior down a particular path so that they become more successful and their clients get happier. So machine learning has a place even on the desktop. And then finally, standards. You've got to look for a way of using the industry standards and incorporating interop technologies that exploit those standards into your transformation program is key.
Okay, thank you all very much indeed on that one. And we have some questions now, so let's take a quick break for the audience questions. And I'm not sure if there's a real answer to this one, but Matt, I'm going to ask you first. Where would the panel draw the line or lines in a mixed third-party vendor and proprietary trading tech stack?
Trading tech stack.
That's the one.
Where would we draw the? Very good question. I would draw horizontal and vertical lines, which might be cheating. So I draw multiple lines. Horizontal lines along the platform, to the point that multiple panelists have mentioned. Open source messaging and integration infrastructure, a common development accelerator platform that sits on top of that to enable the bespoke delivery of point solutions when you need to do something really differentiating. All of that separated with horizontal lines via open APIs, provided via well-defined endpoints, HTTP or some other streaming or a more suitable streaming mechanism, and then fairly tightly corralled vendor point solutions that deliver specific functionality and capability, and depending on your risk appetite, the ability to switch those out when you so choose, or when licensing conditions change, or when some M&A activity happens that takes the vendor off the pitch or puts them in the hands of a more less pleasant owner, shall I say.
Okay, thank you. Gary, one for you, and something that you've touched on earlier. It says about not the big bang. We don't have the budget to modernize everything all at once. Where is a good place to start and move on from there? Where do you see this sort of starting?
So it's a good question, quite an open-ended one of the places it started for us over a decade ago was in how we access data, and making sure that it's probably the start of the data journey, that everything was sat behind an API that the investment teams were happy with, and they loved it. Remember that one of the first quants we showed our new data API to, and it was like, oh baby, as he was starting to use it. But by doing things like that, it gave us then the flexibility to change the underlying technology in our own time behind the scenes. So perhaps that's the thing I'd point to start with. Once you've got good APIs, then the pressure can be off a little bit, and you can focus your attention behind the API and where things are needed.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And James, this one specifically for you. How do you see most firms using desktop interoperability?
Oh gosh. So we see a variety of use cases across the sector. Sometimes desktop integration programs are triggered from IT because they understand that they need to digitally transform their applications, move from legacy to new. So sometimes the push comes from there. I enjoy it the most when organizations, particularly trading institutions, wealth management firms, are shouted, or at least the IT department is shouted at by the end users who complain that they are not as efficient, not as successful as they could be if only the desktop was improved. And so that is a significant driver for change. And the ability to optimize their use of existing and future applications will indirectly help to generate alpha and improve revenue. So that's a really important point.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Amber, this is one for you, which you've said already, but perhaps you can build out a little bit. It says, actually, I'm going to put two together. This is the first one. It says, is cloud the answer here? And then let's add this other one to it. How do you approach what they term right placing in terms of which workloads belong in the public cloud versus the private cloud, on-prem or hosted?
Very good. Two questions. I would love to say that I think cloud is the full answer, but I don't think it is. I think is the second question there really touched upon it. How do you decide what to put in the cloud versus not? We talked about latency, we talked about market connectivity, and I think you have to look at the cost benefit of choosing your own hardware over the cloud. So the cloud gives you agility. You can sort of expand and reduce your estate as you see fit, which is great if you have a lot of change that goes into it. If you have something that's fairly stable or requires a specific physical location, for instance, you're probably better off leaving it where it is. What you need is obviously the platform to help you make that sort of switch seamless. That's really important. But I think that in my personal experience, I wouldn't say that going all in on cloud is necessarily going to be the answer for a firm like ours. It is finding that balance. It is about giving your teams a choice of where they think they can add most value, because really that's, as technologists, that's really what it comes down to. How can we best support the business? And if the best way of supporting it is us kind of pushing aside the drive to go to the cloud and sticking with co-location, for instance, but being able to deliver client solutions quickly, we would choose that. Obviously, for other workloads where we do machine learning, where we do analytics, where we just cannot get the hardware, we'll just jump into the cloud to, again, maintain that agility.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Gary, when I think for you as a user that you probably experienced, it asks, how would the panel suggest sourcing and retaining human resources needed to build and run a competitive digital trading platform?
Lots of different parts to that. I think, I guess simplistically, just create the best, the most rewarding environment possible, and clearly part of that is compensation. Maybe the pressure there has eased a little bit given the state of play now with some of the tech firms. The market's probably freed up a little bit. I find that thinking of so I would always think of the firm as an asset manager, as a hedge fund first and foremost, but having tech properly top table within the firm, and the CEO will talk about how important tech is to the firm. Having that sense of a purpose, that tech is properly important, and then encouraging people to be outward looking and engaged with the tech community. And that allows us to be on the forefronts of the wavefronts of change, be experimenting with new tech. All of those things come together. It gives people the purpose. They know we're doing something that's important for the firm. Gives people the opportunity to investigate new tech and master new skills. And if you trust people and have got the autonomy to do that as well, I think that's quite a powerful combination that helps to attract and retain talent.
Thank you very much indeed. And one last one here for you, Matt. Regulatory change challenges the ability to maintain optimum trading platforms. How can we address this? Regulation is everywhere, is it not?
Regulation is everywhere. How do we address the challenge of regulation?
Regulatory change as much as anything, yeah.
Regulatory change as much as anything. I think the only innovative answer that I've seen to this problem, or proposal that I've seen to this problem in the last few years, is through the use of open source technology as a regulatory solution provider. For that to happen, a few things need to go to plan. One is that the regulator needs to be comfortable specifying regulations, if not as code, but formally. Even to the extent where they would bless an open source implementation of a regulatory rules engine or regulatory checking engine that firms could deploy and run to remove the burden of understanding and implementing and then checking that their implementation matches their understanding. That is a big headache for firms. And firms need to get comfortable embracing open source and contributing to such initiatives. There is a huge benefit across the capital markets industry for firms to generate open source software that solves real non-differentiating costs for them. Too often I see technology being open sourced by firms and capital markets that is either somewhat differentiating or not transversal or universal across the industry. Those projects tend to languish and not get picked up, and doesn't really solve anything. I don't think the capital markets industry has, the capital markets industry has a way to go before we are as sophisticated as the Silicon Valley firms who use open source as a competitive weapon. But I think that's the direction that we need to look at to reduce the regulatory burden on market participants.
Okay, thank you very much indeed to our audience for your question, and thank you to our speakers for your answers. And back to my questions, and over to you, James, if I may. What are the benefits of getting all of this infrastructure right, and the penalties of getting it wrong?
Well, I think we touched upon some of the benefits already. It's a case of, if you get it right, you have the agility and the flexibility to redefine or remap business workflows to suit sort of business demand or changes in the market. So that's really quite important. Getting it right it also allows you to sweat existing assets. So one point that we haven't made so far is that whilst everyone wants to get rid of legacy, and I agree with that in a general sense, if a piece of your legacy system ain't broken, but you can integrate to it, then why get rid of it? The key then is, if you can integrate to it, then perhaps legacy isn't quite as legacy as you first thought. Getting it wrong, Matt mentioned earlier about the risk of buying into a monolithic vendor, and the consequence of that is lock-in, and the consequence of that is money. And ultimately, if you're not flexible, if you can't move fast enough, then loss of market share is going to be a consequence, and we all know where that could end up.
Okay, coming over to you, Gary, as a user, what makes you happy and what keeps you awake at night?
What makes me happy? Well, ultimately happy end users. All of the technology that my team produces is used by front office folks, traders, quants, risk managers, portfolio managers. So, whilst it can only ever be a proxy for ultimately value generated for the firm, and like a firm like Matt's running, it's more directly related. Matt's P&L, the people he can sell goods and services is to, is sort of like directly correlated, I guess, to the quality of the tech. Whereas me, there's an indirect layer between Man Group's share price or the funds it's selling to clients. So that proxy, I think, is how happy my end users are. And if I can build technology that is agile, that is responsive to change, that allows them to get their job done effectively, I'm happy, and as a result, it should make the organisation more successful. I mean, in terms of things that keep me awake at night, there's no one thing really. I view the job, the role I have in an organisation like this as a really super complex optimization problem. There are so many moving parts of bits of tech, layers of tech, different wavefronts, people, projects, career, open source, external engagement. It's a kind of huge, big melting pot of lots of stuff. And what makes it great and what makes it challenging is coming up with the best possible answer in a world where there is no perfect answer. So whilst it doesn't keep me awake at night in a bad way, it's certainly a constant challenge and bright things to mull over when going to sleep.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And finally, I'd like to ask all our speakers to provide some advice for practitioners working to modernize legacy data infrastructure. And Anvar, would you like to start here?
Yeah, sure. I'd say start small, start now, and iterate quickly. I think that's it. I think that the bigger plan you put together, the more likely it is to fail, the more likely it is that you will lose focus and get pulled away into other directions. There's nothing really, in theory, there's nothing really stopping most teams to start looking at isolated areas of their architecture and start figuring out how can we very slowly and gradually move towards a better place.
Okay, Gary, what advice would you offer?
So a few things. First, view the world as wavefronts of change and not binary projects that we step into, finish it, and step out of. Focus very hard on your platform. It's your platform that gives you the ability to leverage your tech and deploy it across the organization. And consider using open source and high caliber engineers. I think that's a very heady combination that helps give you that agility. And finally, think around the structure of your organization. I think there's a lot of power to be gained by embedding your engineers within a business team, so they're sitting side by side with their end users.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. James, over to you. You've got your mute on. James, yeah, thank you.
Point one is to incorporate interop into your modernisation strategy. It will help you bring best of breed applications into the environment. Second point is even with the world's best desktop integration software, if you don't understand the as-is process and you haven't modelled the to-be process, then you're on a sticky wicket. So you need to have excellent UX designers and business domain experts. And then finally, do your due diligence. Test the software infrastructure layers to destruction before you make a decision.
Okay, thank you. And finally, some words from you, Matt.
Thanks, Sarah. So I think firstly, to take a view on what technical disruption is coming towards you and how that will change the market and modernize for that, not the current landscape that you find yourself within. Secondly, to be prepared to rethink the landscape, the map that you find yourself within. There are some very expensive vendor costs, particularly in legacy messaging, that can both save money and enable agility and velocity if replaced. We're helping a number of firms move away from their existing legacy messaging systems, which are now at capacity and are cloud incompatible to Aeron, and they're looking at saving millions a year in licensing, which is OpEx that can be redeployed to other initiatives. And then finally, thinking about the differentiating capabilities in an API-driven and everything as a service environment, enabled by an embrace of the cloud, will enable focused spending to deliver higher value business differentiation and cost reduction. But these are new technologies, new skills, and new practices, and all of that is change. And it's worth as a technology leader or a business leader within an organization to remember the somewhat cynical old adage that turkeys don't vote for Christmas, and that when you're deploying and asking your teams to deliver large technology change, that can be very scary for them, and you need to make it give them sight of what's on the other side of the journey for them.
Okay, thank you, Matt, and thank you to all our speakers for sharing their expertise and their experience. Thank you too to Adaptive and Glue42 for sponsoring today's webinar. Before we close, just a few A-Team Group items that may be of interest to you. You can register for our 23rd of May 2023 webinar on how to make the most of market data. And you can sign up to take part in A-Team's 8th of June 2023 Trading Tech Briefing in New York, or our 5th of October RegTech Summit here in London. That said, that's it for today. So thank you again to Anvar, Gary, James and Matt, and thank you to all of you who've taken part in the webinar. Please complete our feedback forms, as we're always interested in hearing your views and so that we can improve our products. Meantime, thanks again and goodbye.